This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. War in Ukraine rages as millions flee. World Bank aid of $113 million for healthcare. And a Reuters story causes widespread condemnation. But first, more on our main story. International leaders accuse Russia of a barbaric attack on a children's hospital in the besieged city of Mariupol earlier this week, as civilians continue to bear the brunt of the conflict. Russia's attempt at a surgical strike against the capital of Kyiv seemed to have failed, and now they are falling back on their often used tactic of becoming a battering ram and levelling towns and cities to try and quell resistance. Ukrainian President Zelensky said 35,000 civilians had managed to flee the city under fire, but there was little relief in Mariupol, where the mayor said the relentless bombardment had killed over 1,200 civilians in a long and brutal siege.
A local official said the attack wounded at least 17 staff, although no deaths were immediately reported. President Zelensky said that the direct strike by Russian troops had left children trapped under the wreckage. Russian Foreign Ministry did not deny the attack, but accused Ukraine of using the hospital as a firing position. Videos shared from the site by rescue workers showed a scene of complete devastation, with wounded being evacuated by stretchers, past charred and burning buildings. The White House slammed the barbaric use of force against civilians, while British Prime Minister Boris Johnson called the attack depraved. There have been attempts to allow civilians to leave Mariupol and to create safe corridors, but all agreements have collapsed. Aid groups are warning of a catastrophic situation where basic services like water and power have been cut. Moscow forces continue to make a slow advance towards the capital of Kyiv. Residents and volunteer Ukraine forces told AFP, "The Russians shoot to scare people and force them to stay at home. They steal what they can to get supplies and make bases among the inhabitants so that Ukrainian forces do not bomb them." Russia's war has sent about 2.5 million refugees across Ukrainians' borders, in what the United Nations has called Europe's fastest growing refugee crisis since World War II. The tragedy of Putin's aggressive actions is that those that lived in peace now have no home, no hope, and for the time being, no future.
Healthcare in Cambodia is still an ongoing process of improvement. So often, the level of care and the services that some clinics are able to supply can only be described as patchy, or sometimes below an acceptable standard. The issue has received a much welcome boost when the World Bank approved $113 million of a new financing agreement to Cambodia in order to improve access to quality healthcare. The aim is to increase the baseline standard of healthcare across the entire nation. The primary importance is to help the poor.
The new funding includes a $55 million credit from the bank and a grant of $58 million from donors. The financing is the second phase of the Health Equity and Quality Improvement Project, which is aimed at advancing health coverage within the country. The first phase ran from 2016 to 2022 and showed a marked improvement in standards, and was an important step towards the goal of achieving universal health coverage by 2030. The new financing will expand support for the Health Equity Fund to cover health service costs for the poor and the disadvantaged. The project will support the rollout of national accreditation standards, expand service delivery grants, and implement performance-based financing. While Cambodia has made progress in delivering healthcare to its people, more equitable access to quality healthcare remains an important goal. said the World Bank country manager for Cambodia, Mariam Salim. She went on to say, this project will help Cambodia achieve that objective by expanding access for the poor and the vulnerable. Both the level and access to care has increased substantially over the past decade. Now the focus is on attaining a better quality of care.
Here is a story that has left many confused and is so unique it is worthy of note. On Tuesday, Reuters posted an article entitled Mission Impossible, arguing that Cambodia's democracy is sliding backwards after heavy investment by the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, also known as UNTAC. The comment that caused outrage is a sentence that says, "A prophecy that foretold of a God with blue eyes that would one day bless and restore the land and spread through villages during Cambodia's darkest days." This has caused quite the controversy.
The controversy was raised when many asked, how does Reuters know that God has blue eyes? This has been interpreted by many as an extremely racist statement. Cambodia is always grateful for what UNTAC has done, and UNTAC was a multicultural organisation. It had Asians, Americans, Europeans and Africans. The statement by Reuters has been described by some as gruesome and disgusting. The apparent flaws in the narrative of the Reuters article are many. First of all, UNTAC is not God. And as an entity, UNTAC was one of the most ambitious and most successful UN peacekeeping operations in history. UNTAC succeeded in bringing a ceasefire and introduced the first general and democratic elections in Cambodia. The Reuters article went on to criticise UNTAC for being too soft on Hun Sen. But another side of the story is that comparing UNTAC's treatment of Hun Sen and the Khmer Rouge, UNTAC was an extremely courageous mission, considering the volatile environment it operated within. Another very important point that is extremely naive of Reuters to expect that democracy can be implanted in a matter of a few years. Many feel this broad statement is unfair and unjust to the Cambodian people, as democracy can be introduced, but it cannot be imported nor implanted. Democracy is a gradual process.
There are so many falsehoods associated with the COVID-19 vaccine, it leaves one feeling as though you're walking in a hall of mirrors. But even now, new false stories are still emerging. The latest being that the COVID vaccine can give you leukemia. This false and potentially harmful information has spread so widely that the Ministry of Health this week issued a statement to counter it. They flatly rejected the wildly inaccurate information that implied that Sinovac and Sinopharm vaccines can cause leukemia.
The ministry's strongly worded denial comes after a video titled @Feed for Mind aired on TikTok. It said that both the Chinese vaccines are high risk and people who are inoculated with them can be struck down with leukemia. Health Ministry spokesperson called for an immediate end to the distribution of the false information and asked the relevant authorities to take legal action. A Dr. Chun, Deputy Director of Priaket Amelia Hospital, stated all the vaccines used are approved by the World Health Organization, and many people around the world are being inoculated with these very same vaccines. He said, such fake news and false information could have a devastating effect on society, especially as Cambodia is fighting COVID-19 and the Omicron variant. Studies clearly show that the death rate within Cambodia has dropped dramatically since the successful campaign to vaccinate the vast majority of its citizens. This alone is testimony to the effectiveness of the vaccination campaign.
In the latest saga involving a foreigner claiming to be a victim of criminals, Cambodian police are now investigating a scenario described by a Thai woman who says she fell victim to an organ trading gang. after coming to the kingdom to work for a Chinese company. The story has also gained traction in Thailand. It is about a 25-year-old woman who was among a group of Thais sent home after being caught working illegally within Cambodia. When she returned to Thailand, though, she told the police she was forced to work for a Chinese call center. But her refusal to do so led to her being assaulted, detained, and left to starve. And she claimed there was an attempt made to harvest her organs.
First, she alleges the scammers told her that in exchange for her freedom, she needed to contact her family in Thailand to pay them a large sum of money. She added that she managed to escape from the clutches of the call centre and paid for a taxi to bring her to Poi Phet City. She alleged on her way to Poi Phet, the vehicle stopped for an overnight stay at a hotel, and thereafter she could not remember anything until she woke up to find herself back in Sihanoukville. The woman told the police that she was tortured with a stun gun baton. The captors then forcibly siphoned her blood and were about to cut her open to harvest her organs, but she was rescued before they could start the procedure. However, the woman did give no details at all on how she was rescued or who was behind the rescue mission, making the whole story exceedingly murky. The Priya Sihanouk Police Chief Major General said, "The reports on workers being tortured and having organs harvested is not good for the country, as such stories will cause fear and stop people from coming here." Abante Minche, Provisional Police Major General, went further and said that his team are investigating the case, and he stated that the story from the 25-year-old woman is baseless and was a pure fabrication. A conclusion, he said, they reached after a thorough investigation.
Now it's time to look at our sports news.
Just enough time for a quick look at the Premier League table as we consider last weekend's results. Chelsea scraped a win against Newcastle United, winning 1-0 at home. Leeds United 2-1 against Norwich City. Southampton went down 2-1 at home to Watford, and Arsenal had a corker of a game at Highbury, beating Leicester City 2-0.
Now it's time to look ahead and see what the weather has in store for next week.
And our weather chart tells a wonderful tale for frogs, because it's going to rain and continue to rain, starting on Friday, going all the way through to Wednesday and potentially beyond. The temperature is still on a roller coaster, from a low of 79 on Saturday, reaching a giddy height of 93 towards the middle of next week.
This has been the Khmer Times News. You can contact myself at the studio by mailing us at ktnewsstudio@gmail.com. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by downloading our app from your app store. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next Saturday for your weekly roundup.